Good afternoon. So today I wanted to talk about not a tutorial for the Mexican handstand, aka hollow back, whatever you want to call it. So it's not so much tutorial, it's more how do I begin training for the skill. And so I want you to feel what the shoulders are supposed to do, what the weight distribution on the hands looks like, and any pitfalls of being either too flexible or not flexible enough. So the way this movement works is it's a counterbalance, right? You have the basic straight line handstand. If you were to take your shoulders one direction, the legs would have to move in the other one to conserve that center. So in a planche, you can see it very easily, right? The shoulders go forward, the legs go down. The Mexican handstand works in the same way, except that this time the shoulders go back so that, sorry, as the shoulders go back, the legs go over the other way and the back arches. What makes this more difficult to train for compared to something like a planche is that everyone has this range of motion. However, the Mexican handstand takes you into your end range. And most people either are too stiff to get into that range, or for the hypermobile, it's not about getting into that range, it's knowing when to stop, when to resist. So that's what makes it more complicated than it would seem. So we have three different exercises. The first one is a variation on the back to the wall handstand. So you go back to the wall, but it's more distance from the wall than usual so that your body is angled into the wall. So what you want to do is come off the wall without kicking. So you actually use your shoulders. You're going to take your shoulders away from the wall, and that takes your weight into your hands. What's going to happen is the arms are no longer vertical. The arms go at a tilt, which also means that as the shoulders go back, you're going to feel the weight actually in more of the heel of your palm. This is normal, but it will be a little bit harder to control. In this particular drill, you don't have to arch very far. I wouldn't even worry about that right now. It's more about understanding that counterbalance and what to do with your shoulders to get the counterbalance. Now, if you're feeling like you're confident and you have a good control here, try to go into that arch position with the shoulders, and then without coming back to the wall, find that straight line. So to find the straight line, you're doing two things. You're pulling your shoulders in again, and at the same time, you're pulling your body over your hands. I really wouldn't recommend working on this until you have a solid handstand anyway. It's a bit more dangerous. I don't want to say dangerous, but it's a skill that if you don't have the basics down, it's not going to happen. It's not even worth it. Now you can still do some of these exercises for just for strength and flexibility, but I wouldn't put any serious work into the Mexican handstand until you're pretty solid. So exercise number 2 is the bridge with feet elevated. Even if you're super flexible, I still don't recommend going from a full bridge right away. The feet are elevated about hip height, a little bit more, a little bit less, doesn't matter so much. So the point here is, number 1, try to prioritize thoracic spine and shoulder opening, which thoracic spine for me is a weak point, as you can see in the video. But so you get into this bridge, right? You can feel how much weight is on your hands and your feet, hopefully. Just like the previous exercise, the goal is to start taking weight into the hands by leaning with the shoulders in the opposite direction of the legs. So you're in that bridge, you start to lean and press onto your hands, and as you press onto your hands, you can either feel your feet get lighter, or if you're having a good day, you can actually try to lift your feet and press into that Mexican. What this drill is good for is actually tensing up the shoulders at the right time. So again, I talk about hypermobile people who have that range of motion. It's not about opening for them. It's actually about knowing when to close, when to pull in. And then for the people that are tight, I wouldn't call myself tight necessarily, but this is what I feel, is that my shoulders stop, and when they stop, then I can arch and sink into it more. For someone who is hypermobile, it's quite the opposite. It's knowing the moment of when to actually pull the shoulders back to keep that tension. If you don't keep the tension, you have your whole body weight in a shoulder position, which is pretty weak and vulnerable. So developing strength through that full range of motion is important. So again, you have that foot elevated bridge. Press, if you can press into a Mexican good, it's good. Can't talk today. If you can press into a Mexican and again press it back out into a straight body handstand, it's even better. But even if you're not at the point to where you feel like you can press, just working that bridge for opening up the shoulders and opening up the back is still fantastic. And if you're a stud, you can do the whole thing. You can do a back limber, basically, where you go from a bridge without jumping, try to press into it. But obviously that's more advanced, and I recommend the feet elevated version for quite a while. And then the last exercise I have is, it's basic weightlifting drill. I don't know what it's called in weightlifting. I want to say pullovers. You can do it. I didn't have a bar when I demonstrated it, so I just did it with a dumbbell, which is a bit more awkward. But it's essentially this. You lay over a bench with the upper back over the bench. I think I was using 20 pounds in the video. You don't have to go heavy to really feel it. And again, it's not about going heavy, but it's about maintaining form. So you'll see weightlifters do pullovers like this to give themselves increased leverage. I want you to keep the arms as straight as you can so you can simulate what it is to do that Mexican handstand. And again, this is a fantastic drill for those of you with the hypermobile shoulders because you work on developing strength through that extended range of motion. And you develop that feeling of actually pushing back to create stability. So it's an assistance drill, but I highly recommend it, especially, again, for those of you with those kinds of shoulders. Its injury is, I don't want to say easy, but it's a little bit harder to avoid sometimes when your shoulders have that kind of range. So you have to create strength and stability. So in this movement, you're letting the weight pull you open. Don't go farther than what you have control over, and then you pull back. So you can play with how much you want to arch and hollow. If you keep the chest hollow throughout the whole exercise, you're going to feel a lot of shoulder. But if you're trying to do more for thoracic spine extension, you can lift the chest and let it open a bit more. But it's up and down. It's not fast. There shouldn't be any impact at the bottom. It's a slow tempo. 3 to 5 seconds up, 3 to 5 seconds down. And it's not this temp or this range so much we're working on, it's that end range. So feel a stretch, pull it back. Now hopefully this kind of gives you a little bit of insight into how to start training for the Mexican position. And I'll show you one where I go into it and you can see what happens. Essentially, it's the shoulders are always priority. So the body moves around where the shoulders are. So from my straight handstand, I usually go into a little bit of a pike straddle because it's just the, the entry I use. Doesn't matter, there's different ways to enter it. But what you can see is from the straight body, the shoulders go first, and as the shoulders go out, I start to curl and open up. My Mexican's not the best. I could be more flexible. I could sink down into it more. I still feel resistance at that point. But it's that feeling of the shoulders going one way, the legs and the back arching the other way, and you can maintain equilibrium there. One other thing you guys may have trouble with is breathing the position. It will be So first of all, if you can't already breathe naturally in a normal handstand, that's a priority. This position will be significantly more difficult to breathe in. Just something you have to get used to. And again, doing those drills where you're not even balancing, you're just holding it and getting a shoulder stretch, and breathing in those is very useful for being able to breathe in the final Mexican position. If you have any questions, post it in the comments. I'll try to get to it. Hopefully this is helpful, and happy training.